Okay, I showed this slide last year because it's important for us to understand how difficult it is for people to get their heads around compliance. And as you can see that the Oxford English Dictionary refers to these sorts of comments. Carry on, please, Ian. And then clearly as an alternative in terms of the opposite definition, you can see rather curt terms like disobedience, non-compliance, non-conformity. So Ian, if you could. So I guess the choice of words subdues awareness and perhaps discourages the need to understand the significance to Rotarians about the application of compliance. Okay, Ian, if you move on, please. From an RGBI perspective, Rotary compliance is still viewed by some as an unnecessary chore that can be ignored. I think we're very fortunate in District 1115 that we're on very much the right path of engagement. We must continue to create an environment of productive agreement and concurrence to meet our obligations. And it is vital that we listen, learn, share and adapt with everybody to practice good guidance, because it's important for us to, Ian, if you could just pop on, please. This is what it's all about, is protecting our Rotarians and the public activities that they pursue. It's protecting the people we engage with, that's the public, and protecting the image of Rotary, which is absolutely vital. Next slide, please, Ian. So if we look at compliance, it's segmented basically into 5 categories. First of all, we have health and safety. Then we've got safeguarding. Then we move on to data protection. Then we have equality, diversity, inclusion and equity, and then dispute management. Ian, if you could just move on. Right, if we look then at how likely we are to encounter these activities, then in health and safety, it'll apply to all the Rotary events that we undertake. From a safeguarding point of view, it's for those activities that involve vulnerable children and elderly people. From a general data protection, then my recommendation, or RGBI's recommendation, is that we review our information that we hold on all of our activities and review it on an annual basis, then obviously take the appropriate action. From an interaction in terms of diversity inclusion, then obviously that applies to everybody at all times that they have any conversation with respect to their own Rotarians and the public. And we have a dispute management. This is becoming more and more a concern generally in Rotary in the UK. We are fielding an awful lot of disputes and they seem to be escalating quite significantly. So again, manage them at your local level, get the resolvent as much as you can at that stage, but the procedure is quite an involved procedure if you take it forward. Next slide, please, Ian. So how are we doing in 1150 with respect to compliance? Ian, if you'd like to pop on a few. Our current reality is we're still a little bit segmented. In fact, that some clubs have an officer in health and safety. They might have an officer in safeguarding. They might have an officer in equality, diversity. What we're trying to do, if you could move on, please, Ian, is to get a nominated compliance officer per club, and this will act as a single point of contact and integration of all of these activities with respect to the district organisation as well as RGBI. But that doesn't mean to say that the club won't allocate the duties below the compliance officer as in needs the case arises. So you might have a compliance officer, but you might have an individual handling safeguarding, for example. But having that one contact is much easier in terms of communication and accountability. Thank you, Ian. Right, obviously, I'm under a fair bit of time constraints today, but I hadn't made the point of maybe focusing on 2 areas which we undertake on a fairly regular basis, and that's health and safety and safeguarding. Okay, Ian. You're familiar with the risk assessment. I think everybody goes to sleep reading these things these days, but it's all about looking at what you're doing, identifying the risks, assessing how bad they are, finding ways of mitigating those to make them less of a problem, taking action on any risks that you identify that still need to be in the situation, and then check and monitor on a regular basis to make sure that you're keeping it up to date. Next slide, Ian. What has changed in the last 12 months is that the event management needs 3 requirements to accompany the activity. So the risk assessment is as it is today, but we had a lot of discussion about this last year about how complicated the risk assessment was. But we've got a new format, which I'll show you in a moment, which it makes it far less judgmental through the scoring system that was previously adopted. So you need to have your risk assessment. There is now a requirement to have an event plan, and this is about having a complete activity plan with everybody knowing what's going on in a pretty well coordinated way. And the form, even though it's quite an extensive form, can be adapted to fit your event. In other words, you can eliminate things that aren't suitable for you. You can expand on things that are perhaps needed a bit more explanation, but it's very flexible sheet of paper, but you do need the event plan. And then last but not least, you also need to have now an emergency plan. And this is all about having single ownership in the event of an emergency at your event. It allows the individual allocated those duties to integrate with the services, make sure that we have enough data recording, and aim basically at protecting the participants, the public. And again, as in the event plan, it's quite a lengthy one, but it can be adapted very simply to your needs on that particular day or that particular event. Thank you, Ian. This was the old risk assessment form. As you can see, it's got these assessments, severity and all manner of things at the end, which confused an awful lot of people in terms of consistency. So that now has gone, and it has been replaced by this rather simple form, which is about really assessing what the issues are, what you're going to do about them, how can you mitigate some of the risks, and who is looking after it, and when is it going to be done by. So a lot simpler form that has come out of a lot of concerns from previous Rotarians worried about the marking system. Okay, Ian. I'm just showing you here the front page of the event plan. It's all about identifying what the event is, when it's at, what time, the venue, etc. But there's about 6 or 7 individual pages behind this. And as you can see there, you can adjust any of the aspects of there that are identified with bold and italic letters. You can eliminate things that aren't suitable for you. I think it's quite exhaustive, and it's up to you to adapt that particular form to the event that you're holding on the day. And then the next one is a similar situation on the emergency plan. This is fairly self-explanatory when you look at it, and most of the points on there should be applicable to you. But again, I'll show you where to find these during the presentation now. But for your benefit, it's important that you understand that risk assessment, an emergency plan, and an event plan now are all the prerequisites of having insurance cover. Okay, Ian. Right, so the key message is here that risk assessments will only work if you walk through the issues several times, and the more people that are doing this, then the better your risk assessment will be. It is important that every Rotarian that is involved in that event on that day is aware and has read a copy of the risk assessment. The recommendation is to post within a prominent position at an event so the public can see it as well. And then if you're in a situation where you have an event in a public place, please ensure that you consult the local authority. This could be the police, it could be the ambulance service, it could be actually the local council, to make sure that they're fully aware of your activities and also fully endorse the risk assessment that you put together. And I'm sorry to say this, it's quite a tablet of stone, this one, but no risk assessment, no event, no emergency plan, then you don't have underwritten insurance from Bartlett's. Okay, Ian. Right, moving on to safeguarding. The key point here is it a regulated activity? This is about the time and the location that you're spending and frequency with people who are identified as vulnerable people. It could be children and it could be adults, okay? And anyone that is on the disclosure and barring services barred list cannot work in these roles. Therefore, organisations who recruit people for these regulated activities must legally undertake an enhanced DBS check to make sure these roles are suited to the individual that they're offering the job to. Next slide, please, Ian. So what is meant by a regulated activity? In a nutshell, it's about identifying, are you working with children or are you working with adults? And vulnerable adults definition has changed recently. Again, it's to do with all the changing English definitions and so forth. But basically what you're saying now, that vulnerability is about an individual who is receiving certain services like healthcare and personal care. If you are planning to do an activity which could be regulated, then you can do a self-assessment on the website, the government website. You can see listed at the bottom there, and it'll ask you, what are you doing, where are you doing it, how long are you doing it, how frequently are you doing it, and it'll give you an indication of whether or not a DBS is required. Ian, the next slide, please. Sorry, Bob? Did somebody say something then? Okay. Okay. Help in deciding whether a DBS is needed for a Rotarian in an organising body location. And I'm taking here schools as an example. Sometimes known as volunteers. I'll come back to the word volunteers in a minute. But if an organising body is not identifying the need for a Rotarian working in that location to have a DBS check, then as long as the Rotarians are working in pairs at all times, and the recommendation from RGBI is that a man and a woman is a good combination to do so, and further advice would be to have a member of staff present as well. There is no need to have a DBS. If the Rotarian feels uncomfortable in the fact that he or she hasn't got a DBS check, then it would be up to them as a personal action and a cost to apply for one, although DBS will not be granted if it isn't warranted based on the application form. If an organising body needs a DBS to undertake those duties, they should undertake the action and cost to do so. You are volunteering, they're telling you that there's a need to have one, and that needs to be managed by the organising body. In the event of the organising body won't or can't provide this, then the Rotarian will need to raise the appropriate paperwork through their compliance officer, and then we follow the DBS process flow, which then comes to me, and I move it then onto the DBS organisation. It is a free service, but it's also an enhanced DBS. So it's not a general body DBS, it's the gold standard enhanced DBS. And then it's important that when we issue these DBSs, I keep a complete record of them, but the club compliance office should also keep an activity list. And obviously when they need replacing, then they can be prompted to do so in plenty of time to have them available every 3 to 5 years, whatever the DBS concludes its timescale. Next, please, Ian. So this was the big discussion that we had recently on the RGBI, just a second, discussion that we had on the RGBI compliance training this year. What are the big questions a compliance officer in the club has to undertake? First of all, is it a Rotary-led project? In other words, you are responsible for organising the whole thing. Next, please, Ian. Again, does it involve regulated activities? This you can easily identify, as I showed you previously, of going through that checklist through the DBS website. Next, please, Ian. Can the risks be mitigated through risk assessments and or the presence of qualified people to avoid a DBS? Thank you, Ian. And after all the efforts to reduce the risk, only then should a DBS application be raised if it classifies as a regulated activity. So some examples of that would be organising a disabled football match, in other words, Rotary is in charge, or organising tea parties on a regular basis, or activities in a home on a regular basis, but they're all obviously driven by the Rotary Club themselves. On the right-hand side then is a situation, are the Rotarians volunteering to help an organising body, or is it the organising body that is identifying the need and requesting support from Rotarians? So you can see these questions that are coming up. There's a clear difference in approach here. Thank you, Ian. So RGBI is very, very clear, and they're becoming more and more indignant on this. When an organising body is taking the lead, is requesting the resource and identifies the need for a DBS, then it should be providing the necessary compliance, okay? Next, please, Ian. If Rotarians are volunteering their resources, then working with the organising body, they should mitigate the risks to avoid a DBS if that's possible. If one is required, an organising body isn't able to provide, as I said in the previous slide, the Rotary DBS is actioned. So some examples of this would be reading to or taking people in homes for walks, driving a bus or transporting children or vulnerable adults, although the latter comment there has to be done in terms of a qualified person. So the main sort of thing to take away here is that, is Rotary leading the project, managing it, doing everything, or is it being asked to provide some resources by an organising body? So those are the big questions that you need to ask at the very onset of the activity. Thank you, Ian. Okay, you can just flick through these, Ian, one by one. I have all the forms with me, so if you need to generate the DBS, please ask me, because there are new GDPR requirements. There's an additional form being introduced this year. One of the common problems is not using a black pen, and secondly, that there are no mistakes. So my recommendation would be to just to photocopy the DBS form, run off a copy, as I said, trial it and check everything before filling in the actual form, because you can't put a little cross through something and sign it alongside. It won't be accepted by DBS. And then lastly, there's a section called Section Y. This is for the district counter signatory. And what I normally find is most compliance officers are sending it already signed, which means I've got to send them back. The most significant thing that's changed is DBS are now saying general activities and volunteering is too vague a description about what the position applied for or the job title is concerned. So you need to talk to me about the activity if you're raising a DBS, so we can establish more specific wording that avoids the word general and volunteering. And then a simple thing like filling in your passport, okay? You cannot put a driving license down as twice in terms of the verification of your identity. So there are two or three options that you can send there, from passports, driving license, your council tax, etc. But you cannot put a tick on driving license because it appears in all three of the lists that you have options with. Thank you, Ian. Okay, moving on to insurance then. Bartlett's is our broker, and obviously they're underpinned by Aviva in the UK. Thank you, Ian. Okay, you have to complete, as I said, a risk assessment, event and emergency plan, and maintain through reassessment if you're repeating the activity. Please check the insurance guide on the Rotary website for events that are not covered by insurance. There are quite a few new ones there that we're trying to catch up on at the moment. For example, fireworks and hired equipment, because we've had such nasty experiences in the past, now have special forms that have to be filled in, and the discussion has to happen directly with Bartlett's. If you're unsure, then give me a call or even ring Bartlett's up to ask a simple question like, can I tow a trailer behind the my car? Simple things like that, but you'll get an answer pretty rapidly for them. They're very, very good in responding to our questions. And then simple things like using images from a website. This has come up recently, which obviously has licensing or registered copyright, will nullify the insurance. So please make sure that if you're taking photographs or pictures from anywhere, that they're not already licensed and registered without the permission of the people that are making them available, because it nullifies the insurance. Social media, this came up recently again. You must get consent forms when children and special needs are being requested to be photographed. There was an example, I think, in Scotland recently where somebody just taken a photograph of a child that appeared on the social media, and the parent objected to it, and there was all manner of issues that accompanied it. Rotary has £20 million as public product and employees liability, which is us, and it manages its negligence in the place of legally common and statutory law. If anybody wants me to go into detail about that, I can do it separately because it's quite an involved process. Okay, Ian, thank you. So I think this has been touched on a couple of times this morning. Mary just made the point. You all have to, at club level, sign off and accept the RGBI compliance policies prior to the start of the year, so that you're integrating with the club organisation and its activities with RGBI. Failing to do this, and I think there were something like 5 or 6 late finishes last year, means that the insurance cover is void. So club presidents and club secretaries, please make sure you fill in the appropriate forms, which I think Steve Brennan has sent out, or Steve Jenkins. Just make sure they're done promptly and sent back ASAP. Thank you. Ian? So where do you get help and support? Obviously myself, I'm available at any time. Don't worry about giving me a ring at any time. My Rotary website is a foundation of information there. It takes a while to navigate through it, and I'll show you the compliance section in a second. But it's well worth looking at some of the details in there. And obviously, if there's a specific issue on insurance, then please just give Bartlett's a ring. They're very, very helpful people. And you don't wait as long as you do for a bank when you're asking for some information. They're very, very prompt. Thank you, Ian. So this is the compliance section on the RGBI website. If you go into My Rotary, you can see that in club and district rules, you've got compliance, and those are all the listed areas that information is available. And then you can go in that and drill down on any particular aspect you want. You can download any form that you need. And again, if there's any concerns, then you're more than welcome to give me a call and we can go through it together on Zoom, whatever the case may be. Thank you, Ian. So what are our expectations of what you take with you away today? I hope a better understanding of what's involved and why it's important to protect Rotarians, the public, and safeguard the Rotary image with the forms I've indicated. Certainly not to feel isolated or fearful of the actions needed to do these things. There's always help at hand. Please give me a call. And then please, if you can, nominate one compliance officer per club to manage the overall umbrella. It keeps communication simple. It allows one person to have a visibility of all the aspects needed to manage the compliance toolbox at the club level. Thank you, Ian. To conclude, there's one additional form that's appeared this year, and it's to do with any function that you feel that you may need to have a lost child or an adult at risk person station. What it's basically saying is that if there's the possible opportunity of somebody getting lost because your event is so large, or somebody that perhaps feels a bit vulnerable or under pressure, there is a place that they can go to in your event, a location that they can get help from and manage the problem. So again, I only just read this a couple of weeks ago. It is quite an involved thing, but the bottom line is, if you have the opportunity to add to your toolbox of customer care or public care, then please set up one of these lost children or adult at risk locations so people feel comfortable to come forward and feel that it's been managed on their behalf. And Ian, I think that concludes it. There we go. Thank you very much indeed.
Oops, I needed a pound in the box. I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Mark. That was wonderful. And again, it's absolutely vital to run in your Rotary Club. So I'm glad that you were able to be here this morning to explain that to everybody. There are a couple of questions, Mark. I'm going to ask Di Champion and Philomena to talk to them themselves. So if you could unmute yourself, Di, first of all.
Hello, yeah. Rotary up in Cardigan Bay are supporting the Friends of Cardigan swimming pool in certain ways. As it's Friends of Cardigan swimming pool who are the event organisers, what of the forms do we have to do? Do we still do a risk assessment? Which forms do we use, basically?
Well, what I would do is are you talking about doing some activities with these people or for these people?
Maybe running the tea and coffee stand, for example.
Okay, well, if it's just a tea and coffee stand, I would just do your normal risk assessment in terms of hot beverages and trips and falls, etc., etc. I think the event plan, because it's been organised by them and all you're doing is supporting it, I would suggest you talk to them about the event plan and the emergency plan to make sure they are in a situation to provide you with their assessment, and then you can hold that in your file while you carry on your tea and biscuits.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Philomena?
Yeah, hi Mark. I contacted you earlier in the year and you were having problems with signing the forms and things. Just wondering if you're now up and running.
Yeah, it's taken Philomena almost 3 months. I don't know what it is, but DBS have really clamped down on the signatures. So I've been waiting almost 3.5 months for my signature to be renewed. So I have that now. I have a new number. So Brilliant. We're good to go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to ask questions? If you'd like to put your electronic hand up now so we could see you.
I've got my hand up, Mary.
Oh, sorry, Maggie. Go ahead, please.
It was just basically for everybody to know. We did touch on it yesterday, and Mark has already said about it as well. Luckily, within our district, we don't get challenges or problems at events because we have such good compliance. But for any reason, if anything went wrong at an event and somebody was injured, please don't accept liability. Contact the district governor immediately, because we have a crisis management team who would deal with anything, because the last thing we need is bad publicity from an event going wrong. So if anything happens, please contact the district governor or myself immediately, and then we will deal with it. I mentioned yesterday, we have Rob and Maggie Abbott on the crisis management team, and we will look after it for you, alongside Mark.
Thanks, Maggie. That's worth knowing for people, especially the new treasurers that are on board this morning. Steve, District Secretary Steve, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a very quick one. I'm the Steve that needs the compliance statements back from the clubs, and it's not optional as we covered earlier.
Brilliant. That's great. Anybody else got anything they'd like to ask? Everybody's gone silent, so I take it that we're we're complete for this morning.